Now, tonight we have Mel Torrefranca. Mel is a 17-year-old author and YouTuber. She is from Santa Rosa. She's still in high school, and when she is not writing or stressing over homework, she enjoys music, badminton, and photography. She spends a majority of the night with a cup of peppermint tea contemplating the value of human existence. Now, let's give a warm welcome to Mel Torrefranca.
Hi everyone. I'd like to start off by acknowledging Copperfield's Books for hosting this event, especially Jamie, Jesse, and Leo. Thank you so much for supporting local authors. Please give them a hand. I'd also like to thank all of you for coming today. It really means a lot to me that you took the time to come here and support my work. Some of you may know me from school, but if you don't know who I am, my name is Melissa Clark, and I'm the author of Leaving Wishville. I chose to publish under the pen name of Mel Torrefranca because Melissa Clark is a famous cookbook author in New York, and she pretty much stole my name. So I'd like to start off by doing a reading of the opening scene of Leaving Wishville. Chapter 1, Goodbye. It would make a tragic story. Benji Marino, 14, kills himself on a venture to paradise, a catchy title for the announcements on Wishville News before the morning weather report. On the other hand, he might survive. Benji emerged around the corner of Wishville Junior High, eyes locked on a hill in the distance. All he had to do was make it to Candy Road and his escape would be a sweet success. He held his breath as he passed the school baseball field. Nice one, back in line. Benji could recognize the man's voice from a mile away. Coach Hendrick was notorious for never using a microphone at school events. After 15 years of coaching baseball and softball teams, he'd reached the conclusion that screaming was the only way to gain respect from middle schoolers. Mortimer, you're up next. There was a pause, and his mustache twitched as if going through a seizure. Mortimer. A clang came from the fence. Benji refused to look. Hey. Chloe Mortimer ran her fingers along the wires, walking at a matched pace. Where are you headed? Chloe was the youngest student in his 8th grade class, with a birthday at the end of November, but she didn't act the part. She was more mature than most kids their age, gave the best advice, and could have a serious conversation despite her energetic, fidgety nature. Chloe was the type of friend Benji could trust with anything, and although he hated lying to her, he would if he had to, especially today. He watched the ground as they walked, his shoes tapping the concrete in rhythm with her cleats clicking the dirt. She had outgrown her cleats months ago, and although they were originally white, they were now yellowed from use. She held a strange attachment to them, and he wondered how long it would take her to buy new ones. Benji tucked his hands into his sweatshirt pocket and held his head straight, knowing that looking at her would be too painful. Thought I'd take a walk. Oh yeah? Chloe paused, scooping a softball from the ground. She ran back to his side and tossed it into the sky. Come on, I know something's up. She held her arm out, and the ball dropped into her palm. You're planning something crazy, aren't you? What would you think? Benji, a seagull could lie better than you. He made the mistake of facing her. Their eyes met through the wire fence, and he froze. I get that you're curious, but we're not going to let you run off into the wild. Her smile was gone now. I mean, come on. You may as well throw your own dead body in a gutter. Coach Hendrick shouted for Chloe through cupped palms, but she didn't turn away. Benji folded his fingers inside his pocket, waiting for the right moment. When a few girls from the team shouted Chloe in unison, she looked over her shoulder, and he ran. She dropped the softball and shot after him. The gate slammed shut, followed by the hollow steps of her cleats against the sidewalk. It took 3 weeks of self-preparation for this day, and although Chloe wouldn't let him get away, he wouldn't let her stop him either. Listen. Her breathing staggered, barely allowing the words to escape her lips. You think no one would care? How would your mom react? She gasped and sprinted with her last bit of energy, a final attempt to catch him. He saw the tilted sign of Candy Road ahead, and by the time he reached it, Chloe was far behind, hands on her knees, panting. With a forced grin, he hiked up the hill. Chloe had been one of his best friends since first grade, and it was unfortunate that the last memory she'd have of him was the moment he disappeared into the trees. Sweat formed at the creases of his floppy hair. He rubbed the mess out of his face with a tense hand. It's okay, he thought. It'll be worth it. Candy Road was close enough to the edge of Wishville that no one dared to breathe its air. Since the bridge was never maintained, neither was the road. Roots of surrounding evergreen trees grew into it, forming cracks for moss to grow and bumps designed to trip. But to Benji, it was better this way. The road was steep, so he used the roots to push his feet forward. Candy Road had grown a set of natural stairs. When he reached the top, he paused at the base of the bridge in nostalgia, the water gently flowing at the horizon, the sour scent of damp dirt, the gray sky looming over him. He couldn't remember the last time he'd been here, yet the atmosphere was familiar, comforting. He took his first step onto the wide platform of concrete and shut his eyes. Living in Wishville his whole life, he had grown deaf to the ocean, but today the waves thrashed beneath him violently. He opened his eyes to reveal a rusty sign across the bridge, surrounded by a sea of redwood trees. Leaving Wishville, it read. This marked the end of his journey. His grip on the straps of his backpack tightened as he peeked over the bridge railing. His school by the shore, the town park a few blocks to the east, everything was there. Further north were the brick buildings of the town square, Main Street running past it. He lifted his head until his nose leveled with a hill on the opposite end of town, of which yielded a single secluded home. Everything he knew, and he was ready to leave it all behind. Goodbye, Wishville. Benji waved at the view. Facing the mission before him, he engaged in a staring contest with the sign. After a long blink, a new spark brewed in his eyes. He took long and speedy strides across the bridge, reaching closer to the end than ever before. The tree branches by the sign reached forward, calling for him to continue, to finally break through Wishville into a new world. His right foot stretched for the border, and the other side of the bridge illuminated with extravagant colors. The vomit green trees, the musty blue sky, the overpowering browns. He could hear the chirping of distant birds suppressing the screaming seagulls that flew over his head. The colors and sounds were so immersing that he couldn't hear the rustling of bushes behind him, the hammering footsteps. It wasn't until his foot retracted against its will that Benji broke from his daze. He stumbled backwards, the sky fading gray, the trees losing their animation, the dirt as bland and cold as ever. The only colors available were the few familiar wisps of brick-red hair that flashed his vision. Boo. A hand released his backpack with a sturdy throw, and Benji crashed into the railing by the waist. The hungry waves jumped beneath the bridge, trying to reach him. He turned around, head spinning. To his left was James Coy. He wore a white collared shirt underneath his sweater vest and the latest designer shoes. James had always been a natural at fashion, which was odd since no one could imagine him standing in front of a mirror. Perhaps his elegant style was simply an accident every morning. He completed the outfit with an expressionless mask, not a single fold on his forehead or a tilt of his lips, either up or down. You're going to get yourself killed. To Benji's right was Samantha Perkins, who went exclusively by Sam. Benji almost smiled at the sight of her wearing last year's school jogathon shirt, which she didn't participate in. She tucked her hands into the pockets of her fluffy jacket, and a few chuckles escaped her lips. You should have seen the look on your face. She paused her laughter to imitate the exact moment. Boo. Leaning over, she broke into hysteria until her cheeks were as red as her knotted hair. Benji could never understand her. Sometimes everything was funny, and other times everything was somehow meant to insult her. Sam's emotions were as predictable as flipping a coin. When Sam extinguished her humor, James repositioned himself next to Benji. It's illogical to leave. He gave Benji's head a shove from above, taking advantage of his height. You're smarter than this. The idea of staying in Wishville sickened him. I know it doesn't make sense. He pointed to the end of the bridge. But don't you guys ever wonder what's out there? Couldn't care less. Sam crossed her arms and her raspy voice smoothened. Although I guess it's different when your dad goes missing. James glared at her, and she pursed her lips with raised brows. Benji spun around and set his arms on the bridge railing. There's a lot I wish I knew. He watched the seagulls zoom across the horizon, left and right, up and down, wherever they wanted to. By the way, we were Plan B. Sam chuckled. I can't believe Chloe couldn't talk you out of it. You're such a pain. Benji shot for the end of the bridge, but James formed a wall in front of him. Sam stepped away, and a twig snapped beneath her sneaker. Let's go back. Knowing James wouldn't move, Benji tucked his frozen hands into the pockets of his sweatshirt and walked back the way he came. As he took his first step down Candy Road, he peeked over his shoulder to spot the Leaving Wishville sign one last time. He held his head low, the glow in his eyes gone. You know, we're only doing this because we care, Sam said. He scanned the ground for the next route to step on. How did you know? She looked to James, asking permission to tell. He nodded. Well, you were acting all suspicious, took way more notes during class than usual. You searched my binder, didn't you? You weren't taking notes on prepositional phrases, that's the thing. Sam's sneaker chipped against a root, but she caught her balance and recovered. You literally wrote your entire escape plan. Date, time, everything. James ran a hand through his hair. Not smart. Well, Benji said, I guess I'll have to be smarter next time. He smiled, and Sam jabbed him in the side. So I'd like to spend the next few minutes just telling you a little bit more about my book, why I wrote it, and how I got it published. So the book takes place in the town of Wishville, where everyone who's left has never returned. The last man to leave and disappear from town was Scott Marino, Benji's father, and he left 10 years ago. Since then, no one has dared to approach the border. I chose to set the story during 8th grade as Benji and his close friends are preparing to graduate 8th grade and move on to high school. I thought 8th grade would be an interesting year because I feel it's very overlooked in a lot of novels. And for me, it was a very interesting time filled with excitement for the future, but also the fear of time moving too fast. During 8th grade, I was reading a lot of books that had very perfect endings that were tied up in ribbons, and I knew that that wasn't something I wanted to do. I wanted to write a story that was more abstract and that allowed the reader to interpret the ending in a way that was most significant to them. So the story behind this book goes all the way back to when I was 10 years old, and I read The Girl Who Could Fly by Victoria Forrester. The book was morbid, hilarious, and I was absolutely in love with it. A lot of the stories I read at that time were tailored for a younger audience and sheltered them from any darker themes, but this story was not afraid to dive deep. Reading The Girl Who Could Fly inspired me to finally finish a project. I had been writing several things before then, but I never actually finished anything. So I started to work on a story called The Sky Weeps With Us. I finished it when I was 12 years old, and I published it, self-published it, when I was 13. It's this book right here. And I chose to publish it under the pen name of Jane Windshield, like the car windshield but without the D because I thought it was cool. And although I really didn't know what I was doing, and I made a lot of mistakes with publishing the book, it was ultimately a great learning experience for me, even though it failed. After my failed publication, I decided to start a personal blog called Teen Author's Journal. There weren't many kids that I knew in school who liked to write or even read, so I didn't really know who I could talk to about my writing. So I turned to the internet, and I used Teen Author's Journal as a creative outlet. I didn't have many expectations for what the blog would become, but after a couple of months, some teen authors started to comment and send me messages. They were from all over the world, like my friend Amina in India, who writes amazing poetry, and Zach and Yeva from Canada, and Eva from Australia. And I was astonished by the number of teen writers that were out there, and we all had one thing in common. We didn't know anyone else our age who liked to write in person. And so I decided to turn Teen Author's Journal into a community blog, or essentially a social media platform for teen authors everywhere to connect through their writing. I graduated 8th grade, and during my freshman year of high school, the other teens on the website were encouraging me to join them in participating in NaNoWriMo. NaNoWriMo is short for National National Novel Writing Month, which takes place every November, and it's a challenge to write 50,000 words in 30 days. I was very skeptical at first because I was busy with school and I wasn't sure if I would actually be able to finish the challenge, but I proved myself wrong, and by the end of the month I had 50,000 words and the first draft of Leaving Wishville. This gave me the motivation to spend the next 2 years editing the book and completing it, revising it until I knew it was ready for publication. I eventually decided to traditionally publish the novel and started to query agents. It was a very time-consuming and discouraging process. I received countless rejection letters. A lot of agents ignored me, and those that did show interest eventually turned me down. During this time of discouragement, I was watching a YouTube channel of a girl named Abby Emmons. If you like to write, you've probably heard of her. She makes YouTube videos about her writing experiences and tips that she has. And during that time, she was just about to publish her debut novel, 100 Days of Sunlight. And she explained the reason why she chose to self-publish her novel rather than traditionally publish. She wanted full control of everything, from the content to the cover design and pricing. She didn't want an agent or publisher or any third party to tell her what should be changed in order to fit what they believed was right for the audience. And then I realized that I wanted that too. I wanted to write something different that traditional publishers might not see as mass marketable. And so I started to research self-publishing. It's very easy to self-publish, but it's very challenging to self-publish professionally. I knew this from first-hand experience with The Sky Weeps With Us, so this time I needed to do it right. There was a very steep learning curve, and there was a lot of steps involved. If I did not enjoy the business aspect of publishing a book so much, I am sure that I would have given up. And so I realized that it was kind of ridiculous that the only two options for authors to publish books were to throw their manuscript in a lottery and hope that some agent caught it, or to spend a lot of time, energy, and money to learn how to self-publish, which they may not even have a passion for. And so I decided to make Leaving Wishville the first publication in my hybrid publishing house, Lost Island Press. The goal of Lost Island Press is to provide an alternative path for authors to publish their novels without a steep learning curve or a ridiculously challenging barrier of entry. In the last few months, I've acquired an amazing team, and we've opened up submissions for other authors who are interested in publishing their teen and young adult novels. So now that I've given you a brief overview of my writing journey so far, I'd like to open up the room to any questions that you may have. Thank you.
And thank you everybody for coming. Remember, we have snacks, so feel free to grab some before you go. And we have copies of Mel's book at our registers. We ask you to purchase them before you have them signed. Okay? Thank you all for coming.